All right, welcome back to Bold. My name is Alex Yemek, your host. And today at Bold, we are very, very happy to talk about student leadership with Nadin Fallah, right?
Happy to be here.
All right, Nadin, we're very happy to have you. This is a very, very exciting subject to talk about student leadership. And for me, is a first time. So I'm really, really, really excited. And as we usually do here at the show, of course, we want to know about you. We want to know about, how you got involved here in the school, your personality, who you are, where you come from, right? So let me ask you this. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure.
What are you studying, etc.?
So I'm currently a senior here at the University of St. Thomas. I am studying international business. And ultimately my dream is to go and work as an attorney, actually, and get into international law. At the moment I'm looking at international trade law. My background's kind of unconventional. So I moved to the United States about 6 years ago. And growing up, I was an expat kid. My dad was working in oil and gas. And so we moved around every couple of years. But that sort of like global understanding and global exposure really shaped the way that I thought. And so coming to the University of St. Thomas for me was quite a big shift from going global to going local. But it was a phenomenal shift in the sense that I found a welcoming community here that was still open to that global perspective, and gave me an opportunity to become part of the Houston community and the Celt community, and such a big, huge family in such a small space. In terms of involvement, my first year, it's funny enough, I stayed away from involvement as a whole. I focused on just my academic career and seeing how much I could hold and how much I could carry just with the sheer weight of academics. And for a very long time, I was quite hesitant to delve into the Celt culture and like everything that the university had to offer. And towards the end of my freshman year, a couple of my friends were applying to what's known as like the centralized leadership process, through which a lot of students gain their leadership positions. And I had gotten to this point where I was like, you know what, I've got nothing to lose. I might as well apply. And so I did, and it completely changed my whole experience at St. Thomas from that moment. That summer I served as an orientation leader, and I proceeded to serve our registered student organizations as treasurer, and being exposed to student leadership on this campus in the way in which we focus on students as servant leaders, giving back to the community and not focusing on leadership as a position, but on leadership as a habit, as an activity, as a way that we carry ourselves, and a bigger part of our personality as Celts. That to me was incredibly instrumental in allowing me to get to the point where I am right now. Wow, this is beautiful.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I want to ask you before we get into the details of the leadership position, why St. Thomas? Like and I have to ask, that question because St. Thomas is a Catholic university, right? And so does that, is the religion, anything, does that have anything to do with you being here at St. Thomas? And if you don't mind me asking, your background in religious belief, what is your background?
Absolutely. That was a huge input in coming to St. Thomas for me. One, I have moved around a lot. Growing up, we lived in 5 different countries, 3 different continents. There was a lot of exposure. But at the same time, when we moved here, like my family had always been with me throughout our travels, and my family was here. And so I didn't want to leave the one constant that had been my stability throughout my life. And so I was okay, well, I'm going to university. It's already an independent step. Let's stay close to the family. And then religion was definitely a factor in that. My father is Muslim and my mother is Catholic. So there was always a very colorful dialogue at home in terms of acceptance and openness.
Yes.
And I had always wanted to be baptized. And so coming to the University of St. Thomas, I found that as an opportunity that I couldn't find anywhere else.
Exactly. Wow. Yeah. No, that's. I usually like to ask those questions because me, I'm a Catholic, and I always want to know when other people's, let's say, for instance, if they're not Catholic, where why the University of St. Thomas. So that's a very beautiful thing to know. And let's get it. I want to get into this leadership role now. What organizations are you affiliated with, and what is your role, within that organization?
Yeah. Well, right now I'm dedicating essentially all of my efforts to serving as student body president. But my time at St. Thomas before then, I think in many ways has been the build up to this moment. And so it's more than just serving as student body president, which happens to be this like giant conglomeration of responsibilities. Throughout my time here, it was getting involved with chartered student organizations and getting involved with student clubs like the International Study Society, and supporting clubs like some of our most colorful clubs on campus, our Filipino Student Association, our science clubs, being able to support them as treasurer. That was helpful to me to learn what the student experience means here. And realizing that there is no one road to success. There is no one road to student leadership. There is no one road to involvement. This university provides so much for so many different types of students, so many different entryways that target the passions of our individual students, so that you don't have to tailor your passions and your interests to what this university offers, but on the contrary, the university tailors its resources to our students. So for me, it was getting involved in International Study Society, the Center for International Studies. Studying abroad was a huge way of getting involved, getting to know other students and sharing a cultural experience with them. And then that transitioned into taking over as chair of the registered student organizations and helping students find their niche spaces on campus, the things that they love to do, and helping them make those organizations real. Helping students start new clubs, helping students organize the events that they would love other students to be able to attend. And then that eventually transitioned into this big student body president. How can we reach out to underrepresented student populations on campus? How can we represent all of our students and make sure that we are providing them with the student experience that they want to see? So I guess that's kind of like
that's
the roadmap.
That's a whole lot of details. I know that you talked a little bit about how you got into this, right? But I want to ask you a little bit more about, were you influenced by anyone, or did you kind of like hear about it before or anything like that? I mean, what was really your bigger push to this move? Yeah,
I think the bigger push was like the year of not being involved. And I know that might sound kind of strange, but I was I still am a commuter. I've been a commuter for like my whole 3 years here. But my freshman year was genuinely driving to campus, going to class, and going home. And I didn't allow myself to have that engagement. By the end of the year, I was like, I just want to be part of this community in a bigger way. Like, I'm going to be here for 4 years. Is this really what I want my student experience to look like? And it was by complete chance that I heard about the application process for the leadership positions. And I was like, well, I have nothing to lose. Let's go for it. So it was that buildup of the year of not being involved. While I was here, though, I did meet a former leader who, his name's Mohammed Khan, and he's currently attending Texas State University. And he was actually the chair of the registered student organizations before I was. And his mentorship and his approach to servant leadership and his way of rallying up a team and everything that he taught me about being a servant leader, I've carried with me from that moment. And so in terms of a mentor, he's probably the figure that stands out the most to me, especially when we look at the students that we have on this campus. the way that a student communicates to another student is unique to the way that a faculty member or a staff member might communicate to another student. And so to have mentorship, leadership mentorship from a fellow student is something that it's incomparable to other experiences. And that's something unique that we provide at St. Thomas that to me has been fundamental.
Wow. Yes, this is very interesting. So in the light of doing that, I want to know, for example, I know that you talked about the type of things that you do in that position, right? Let's talk about a more practical way, like let's say on a daily, let's say during the week, let's say from Monday to Friday. How is that work going, for example?
Right now, as student body president, it's funny because student body president is a relatively new position, and it's just such a different beast from anything I've ever done before. So before, it was a lot more like personal engagement with students in terms of clubs. Like you're a student, you want to start a new club, you're coming in, we're showing you how it happens. It's a lot of like person-to-person contact. And now it's a lot more like large scale. You're the voice of the student body. How are you reaching out to the student body? So Monday to Friday, what it looks like is honestly a lot of office hours. So being in the office for students to approach you with questions, problems, concerns, hopes, things they want to see on campus. So making yourself available in that space. It's also having the privilege of sitting at committee meetings in which you're expected to represent the student body. So I'm currently sitting on the Student Affairs Committee and the Buildings and Grounds Committee. And so I get to represent the students on those two platforms. And then another tool that we use is open forums. And this is probably the most direct contact with the students. And it's just an opportunity for students to come in and directly ask their questions and address their concerns. And that's where I'm able to gain the most input in terms of what the students want to see, especially when you realize that you're the only student sitting at some of those meetings. You want to make sure that you're not representing yourself. You're not representing your personal interests. You're representing what the students want to see on campus.
Exactly. Yeah. Before we go to the break, I want to ask you this last question, right? Give me, let's say, one of the most popular subjects that you probably had some of the students come in and ask you. Which one can you remember where a student comes to you and say, this is what we want or in the campus?
Yeah. I think right now what we're hearing the most of is about the restructure. And every time there's like a big change on a university level, there's always going to be a little bit of unease. But what's been really lovely to see is the student energy behind the restructure, and how much they want to have a voice in it, how much they want to have an input in it. And so it's this like overarching idea of students wanting to be agents of positive change that I've been hearing over and over again, and it's been reiterated. And I think it speaks so loudly of what St. Thomas is and of what Celts are, and their desire and their constant commitment to being agents of positive change.
Wow. So let me ask you this. As a student leader, right, what can you say you've learned so far since you've become, I know you gave us a lot of information, but what is it that really, really mark you that you can say you learned that as soon as you became that leader that you were born to be, right?
Oh, goodness.
What is that beneficial thing that you got out of it, so far that you're really enjoying?
I think in my time before I came here, I had this really like over stigmatized idea of what leadership means. And you're fed a lot of ideas of like what it means to be a good leader. And I found myself believing that leadership really was a position. It was a title, and I think one of the most valuable lessons I learned here is that leadership is a process, and that you do have that image of the ideal leader that you want to be, and you strive for that every day. But that ideal is always far higher than anything you can ever reach, and that's what keeps you going. And it's not about reaching that one ideal of like the perfect leader, like being the embodiment of the position that you believe you should be. It's about serving the community that you're called to serve and growing in those leadership skills to better represent that community and seeing how you can best tailor to the needs of that community. So for me, it was that really that like mental like paradigm shift in my mind of like, what is leadership? And realizing that I didn't want to be like just any leader, you know, not just an effective leader, but a servant leader. And a good leader, I think that gave me the drive to work in that direction and hopefully get somewhere close to the goal.
Exactly. Yes. Is really a journey. And I want to get to the skills and knowledge because, as you know, leaders go to a lot of positive and negative things. You know, people like what you do and some people don't like you. It's always like that. You know, you're always going to have people who are going to encourage you and like you, and you're always going to have people who are not going to like you. Right. And so the skills that you gain and knowledge that you gain, not just, you know, in the leadership as you're talking about, but to also mentor people, as you mentioned before that you had a mentor and all that stuff, but you find yourself in a position where you now have to mentor others as well. Right. So let's talk about those skills. How do you feel doing that? You know, I know that you now as a leader, you take it as a huge responsibility to mentor others because you have to do it as a leader. So how does that journey has been for you? Not only receiving mentorship, but also mentoring others who will be coming, you know, after you.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of pressure for sure, but it's incredibly exciting to be able to be a part of their leadership journey. And one thing that I have learned is that you can't tell people to be the leader that you are or that you wish they were. A lot of it is about them understanding what their vision is and for them to lay out their organizational objectives so that you can then hold them accountable. This is what you wanted to do. How are you reaching these goals? Allowing them to think critically, to realize for themselves what is right for their organization, what isn't right for their organization, what their responsibility is and what their responsibility is not. But also focusing on aspects like emotional intelligence. Do you know the people on your team? What are the personalities on your team? How are they working together? How can you compensate for one another? How do you communicate with one another to make sure that you are a cohesive unit when you go and host events or when you go and, you know, show your face in front of the student body? Other things like team building activities, other things like community awareness. What are the populations that we have on campus and how are you reaching out to those? I think those are all part of that mentorship process that not just me, but as leaders in general at this campus, we engage in. Like, it certainly isn't me. I do have the opportunity to mentor the vice presidents of our executive student organizations, but they in turn mentor their teams, who in turn mentor their interns, who in turn help to build this larger community of leaders. And so that mentorship opportunity really is available here at St. Thomas, and it's not just for a niche population.
Yes. You're talking about something very important. I want to ask a follow-up question to this because we'll be getting into your education. You are a leader here, you know, and there's another part that I wanted you to address. For example, even if you haven't done it yet in your experience, is how would you mentor someone who's a leader who's going to probably have a negative effect to what he did? Let's say, for example, he's being criticized, how to handle these type of things. Because, and what I want to know from you is that as a leader, right, even if it's not here in the school, do you ever at any point in time focus on any other leadership in the world? Let's say a world leader, a president, or someone who's basically inspiring you, or someone that you can investigate about or look into and say, hey, you know what, I like the style of this leadership, let's say the president of the United States or president of such country or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So I kind of want you to address that part where how does a leader handle negative criticism? What would you tell someone, and do you have someone that you look up to?
I'm one of the most indecisive people you will ever meet. And so I've always strayed away from like being like, oh, this is the person that I want to be, or I want to have like leadership skills like this person. I feel like with every leader you can say, well, I see myself in this, and this is something that I can't be as a leader. And it might be effective for this person in this situation, but it just wouldn't fit for me. And for my leadership style, that's not the leader that I am.
Exactly.
And so, to be honest, rather than these like large, big name political leaders, I look more to the people in my life who in their own ways have shown me this is how you lead an organization, and this is how maybe you don't so much lead an organization. And those have been people like the mentor that I spoke of earlier, like his predecessor, like advisors, like faculty and staff advisors that I've had on campus, who I've learned a great deal from some faculty members who might have taught classes in like diplomacy or international law, and in that way have inspired me in the way that they carry themselves. In terms of leaders who have received negative criticism,
if you get a negative criticism, how you handle that?
One thing that I've always been told is like find the right channels for communication, and I think step one is self-reflection and seeing where that criticism comes from and what it's rooted in. And then from there, to what extent do you hold responsibility in that criticism? To what extent is it founded, and to what extent is it unfounded? Okay, where it's founded, how can we address the root problem? At the end of the day, in our positions, we serve the student body as a whole. And so we represent the students who we agree with, and we represent the students who we disagree with. And so it's equally important to reach out to those communities that might have expressed some negative criticism and see how we can work together to make sure that our community as a whole is cohesive, or at the very least communicating. But I think finding the proper like venting mechanisms and looking to a mentor, whether it be a student mentor or a faculty mentor or a staff mentor, in that situation to help you pick back up and then find the motivation and the energy to go back to that negative criticism and see how you can then address it.
Yes. Wow, that's wonderful. Let me ask you about your education. Serving as a student leader, how does that complement your education? What benefit do you get out of it in terms of education, for example?
Yeah, when I first started off, I thought that it would be completely separate, and instead I found the intermingling in so many of my classes. For instance, right now I'm currently enrolled in a business ethics class, which I absolutely love, and oftentimes we'll talk about business ethics, so we'll talk about ethics as a manager, or as a business leader. And at the same time, you think about it and you're like, well, what about ethics as just a leader, like an organizational leader on campus? And it helps to enrich your experience within the classroom as well, because you come at it with a different angle. You have something more of the input to bring into the classroom. And it doesn't just limit itself to major specific classrooms. This seeps into the core of like the core curriculum. It seeps into the way that you perceive, philosophy, and then you go back and you apply it to your student experience. And then you say, well, how can this then apply to your career? It becomes student leadership complements the academics in the sense that it allows a greater conversation between the different things that you're involved in on campus, so that when you leave, you are more comprehensively well-rounded because you have addressed all those different aspects of the student experience beyond just academics.
Yeah. Wow, this is nice. It sounds right.
Good. I think it should.
That's a wonderful thing. And in light of that, now that you have talked about how helpful it is for students, what can you tell a student who wants to start, right? I want to get into this position. How should they start? how do you want a student to get involved, right?
I think step one is cast out self-doubt. Stop telling yourself that there are other people who can like be in this position instead, or that there are so many reasons why you shouldn't apply, or that you're worried about time management. This university is composed of people who want you to succeed, and they will find ways to help you to succeed. Step two is don't be afraid to ask. Reach out. There is on the first floor of Kirker Center, all of the executive student organizations are located there. The Office of Student Activities is there. Any student can come in at any point and say, you know, I want to be involved on campus. How can I do that? What options are there for me on campus? And without a doubt, you will find either a student or a staff member able to help you find that route. And then the other thing is the centralized leadership process takes place every single spring, and that is another opportunity for students to formally submit their application for specific positions on campus, and that includes residence life, that includes all of our chartered student organizations, and that includes orientation as well, and freshman symposium. So those are all tools that exist for students, but really the answer to student involvement is just a conversation away.
And let me ask you this. So the term for that position is how long?
Typically, all of the positions are a year long
so
term.
Just the 2 semesters
That's
that
right.
is in that 1 year, and then you have to run. Can you run again the second time?
You can run again, yes.
Okay. So it's like unlimited run, basically.
As of right now, yes,
Okay.
it is unlimited.
So,
for specific positions, elected positions on campus, it does require students to have a certain number of credit hours before they are able to run for election. But for application positions, that typically is not a restraint. So any student can apply at any time.
Okay. So for your position, you do have to have a certain number.
You do have a certain number of credit hours. That's
I'm
right.
glad, people definitely want to know these things.
Yeah.
And as a big time president, how many staff do you have?
Funny enough, directly reporting to me in the sense that they help me with my day-to-day operations, none.
Oh, okay.
I do, however, help to oversee what we call the executive student organizations.
Yeah.
And so they're all considered vice presidents, but each of them has an individual organizational mission. So we have a group that's dedicated to reaching out to underrepresented populations on campus and different cultures on campus. We have a group that's responsible for large-scale events. We have a group that's responsible for spirit and service. And we have a different group which is Senate. And we have a different group which is Treasury, which helps to fund everything else. And so ultimately, these individual organizations work to carry out their missions.
Yes.
And then I ultimately honestly report back to let them know what the students want to see on campus and how together we can work on a unified mission to provide the best student experience that we can.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Now, let me ask you this, as we're about to finish the show, is what are, 3 to 4 reasons why someone should take the leadership position on campus, any leadership position on campus? Can you come up with 3 or 4 reasons why?
Only 3 or 4?
Because you're a leader, so.
3 to 4. Oh, let's try to compress them. Okay. 1, because it allows you to more fully and more directly act as an agent of change on this campus. It amplifies your voice, and we're gifted with so many students who have incredible talents on campus, and we need to hear from them. So the ability to be an agent of change on campus. The fact that it's incredibly enriching regardless of where you come from, what your background is, what your academic journey has brought you to. The fact that this is a CULT community and we need to be more tight-knit. And so there is a place for everybody in student involvement. And 4, on a practical level, it does provide you with skills and experiences that later in your career will allow you to succeed. So,
Yeah, wow. Yeah, this is wonderful. Now, final question, right? Now that since you're a president, do you have access to the president's office any you want?
Excellent question. President Ludwig has been very, very open with me in terms of his office. So he has made himself available to me to hear the needs of the students and to in turn ask student input for a number of different issues.
Yes.
And so I suppose, like, depending on his schedule,
Yes.
I am able to set up meetings with quite a bit of ease. And so there is a lot of access to the president of the university, and there is a larger conversation, like bridging that gap between the president and the students.
Wow.
I found him very willing to do that.
Wow. No, thank you so much, Nadine.
Thank you for having me.
This is wonderful to know. You know, this is very enriching, and we really hope that our listeners here at UST will really take that in consideration. This is very good information. Thank you for all of you who have been listening to Bold. I'm Alex Yemek. Thank you again. We're going to meet next time.